On the evening of the 30th of October, 2025, Buckingham Palace released a statement that ran to fewer than 200 words. The main body contained 109 of them. His Majesty has today initiated a formal process to remove the style, titles, and honors of Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew will now be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. That was the operative sentence. The rest confirmed that formal notice had been served on Andrew's lease at Royal Lodge, the 30-room house in Windsor Great Park he had occupied since 2004, and that he would move to alternative private accommodation. The statement closed with a note that these censures were deemed necessary, notwithstanding the fact that he continues to deny the allegations against him. 109 words. That was the instrument. Here is what those 109 words didn't contain. They didn't contain the name Sarah Ferguson. They didn't address her housing, her status, or her future. The palace had no obligation to speak to any of those things. She wasn't Andrew. The lease was Andrew's. The titles were Andrew's. Her 2-decade residence at Royal Lodge was a practical arrangement, not a legal one. When the king acted against his brother, the effect on Ferguson was consequential, not deliberate. A secondary impact the statement had no particular reason to address. No provision for a new home was extended to her. No equivalent arrangement was made. She has 2 daughters. The elder, Princess Beatrice, is married to Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi, founder and CEO of Banda Property. By Banda's own LinkedIn profile, the company has developed over 400,000 square feet of London real estate with a total gross development value of almost £700 million. Multi-million-pound properties are his professional product. The younger, Princess Eugenie, is married to Jack Brooksbank, whose career has been shaped by his long association with Casamigos Tequila, the brand created by George Clooney, Rand Gerber, and Mike Meldman in 2013, and sold to Diageo in 2017 for an initial $700 million, with contingent payments that could bring the total to $1 billion. Brooksbank served as UK brand ambassador for Casamigos, announced in January 2018 by the drinks business, and from 2022 has worked in marketing and sales for Meldman's Discovery Land Company at the Costa Terra Golf and Ocean Club in Portugal, where he and Eugenie now primarily live. Between the 2 households, there is no shortage of means, no shortage of space, and no shortage of spare rooms. The question underneath every documentary, every tabloid breakdown, and every royal analysis video about Sarah Ferguson asks some version of the same thing. Why won't her daughters take her in? A commenter under one of the year's most watched Ferguson videos put it plainly. It's not like they don't have money. Their husbands are successful businessmen. 6 likes. A small number. But it was the question nobody was answering directly. This script will answer it. Not from gossip, not from speculation about private conversations, but from the documented mechanics of how the royal institution prices proximity, and from the record of what it taught those 2 girls by applying that pricing to their mother, beginning in the summer of 1992 and ending with a 109-word statement 33 years later. Sarah Margaret Ferguson was born on the 15th October 1959. Her father, Major Ronald Ferguson, soldier, farmer, equestrian, polo manager to Prince Charles, ran Dummer Down Farm in the village of Dummer, Hampshire. She described her family as country gentry with a bit of old money, and the description was accurate in both directions. She was descended from King Charles II through 3 of his illegitimate children, and the social world she grew up in was the English county set of horses, field sports, and loyalty conducted through proximity rather than institution. Her parents divorced in 1974. Her mother, Susan Wright, later Susan Barantes, had returned from a stay in Argentina with Hector Barantes, an Argentine polo player. By 1975, Susan had left the United Kingdom to marry Barantes, moving to the Argentine Pampas outside Trenca-Lauquen. Sarah was 15. She stayed in England with her father, who remarried in 1976 and had 3 more children. The polo world continued. Dumber Down Farm continued. The maternal anchor had gone. She attended Hurst Lodge School in Ascot, strong swimmer, good tennis player, undistinguished academic. After completing a course at Queen's Secretarial College at 18, she worked at an art gallery, then 2 public relations firms in London, then a publishing company. She worked briefly as a chalet girl in the Alps. She dated Kim Smith Bingham, a stockbroker, and then Paddy McNally, a motor racing manager more than 20 years her senior, before the engagement to Andrew. She and Andrew had known each other casually through the polo circuit since childhood and were reacquainted at Royal Ascot in 1985. The engagement was announced on 19 March 1986. The wedding took place at Westminster Abbey on 23 July 1986, before a public that received her warmly. She was 26, direct, and physically robust in ways the tabloids were already contrasting, unfavorably, as it would later prove, with Diana. Early coverage described her as brash, where Diana was fragile, relatable where the institution was remote. She passed her private pilot's license in February 1987, a 40-hour course funded as a wedding gift by Lord Hanson, and was presented with her wings at RAF Benson in December. The public found her genuinely likable. Princess Beatrice was born 8 August 1988, Princess Eugenie on 23 March 1990. From early on, Ferguson later wrote in Finding Sarah, she found royal life monumentally challenging. Andrew's naval duties kept them apart for most of the year. By her own account, approximately 40 days together annually during the first 5 years of marriage. The palace's courtiers ran on a protocol she had not grown up inside. Her commercial instincts, the children's books, the endorsement deals, the television projects, generated friction with institutional culture. A publisher later claimed he had to intervene when palace officials blocked Ferguson from promoting her first children's book. The word the tabloids started reaching for, by 1991, was brash. The meaning it carried wasn't affectionate. By January 1992, photographs of Ferguson with Texan multimillionaire Steve Wyatt, including one showing Wyatt with her infant daughter, had appeared in newspapers and attracted the wrong kind of attention. On 19 March 1992, 6 years to the day after their engagement announcement, Buckingham Palace confirmed the formal separation. The institutional consequences were stated plainly. Ferguson would no longer undertake public engagements on behalf of the Queen. The Queen confirmed she wouldn't assume responsibility for Ferguson's debts. She was outside the tent. Formally, financially, and with the explicit withdrawal of the one thing the institution provides that can't be bought commercially, the quiet assurance that the press machinery is working on your behalf. 5 months later came August. Thursday, 20 August 1992. The Daily Mirror published photographs taken without consent at a villa near Saint-Tropez. They showed Ferguson on holiday with John Bryan, an American financial manager who had been handling her affairs. Bryan was photographed with his lips pressed to her foot. She was topless in several frames. The tabloids reduced it to a phrase that would follow her for the rest of her life. Bryan maintained for years that he was playing Cinderella, kissing her foot, not sucking her toes. But the tabloids weren't in the Cinderella business. Ferguson was at Balmoral Castle with the entire royal family when those photographs landed on the breakfast table. She wrote about that morning in her 1996 memoir, My Story. Eyes wide, mouths agape, the porridge getting cold. She described the Queen as furious, a fury, she wrote, that wounded me to the core. Ingrid Seward, editor-in-chief of Majesty magazine and one of the more tenacious chroniclers of the House of Windsor, later confirmed the Queen was absolutely furious and couldn't believe Fergie could have been so stupid to allow this to happen. Multiple named biographers and royal commentators attribute Prince Philip with throwing the newspaper in front of Ferguson and leaving the room. Those are second-hand recollections, not verified primary documents, but the general atmosphere is supported by Ferguson's own account and by multiple independent sources who have spent careers researching this material. By that same day, she had left Balmoral with Beatrice, Eugenie, and their nanny, departing for Aberdeen Airport. She never returned to Balmoral as a full member of the royal family. Now, a precision point matters here. The formal institutional withdrawal had already happened in March. The separation announcement had already removed her duties and financial protections. The August photographs didn't cause her expulsion. The expulsion was already complete. What the photographs destroyed was any remaining possibility of soft rehabilitation, any unofficial residual goodwill that might have been converted back into some form of informal institutional support over time. There is no single named palace official who documented this as a policy decision. No formal paper records the withdrawal. What multiple biographers describe, across independent accounts, is the practical outcome. The institution's informal press machinery stopped treating her as its concern. She was, from that point, navigating the tabloid ecosystem without a press office that considered her worth defending. Defense is the only currency the institution issues. It does not announce when it stops issuing it. The cancellation appears only in consequences. Her daughters were 4 and 2. They couldn't read the institutional mechanics, but they could see who was at breakfast the following morning and who wasn't. They could see which direction the car was pointed. The divorce was finalized on 30 May 1996. The financial settlement exists in 2 figures that are both, apparently, accurate about different components. Senior officials later told the Sunday Telegraph that the total package, including £500,000 from the Queen to purchase a home for Ferguson and the children, £1.4 million in trust funds for Beatrice and Eugenie, a £350,000 cash handout, and a monthly allowance, came to approximately £3 million over time. What Ferguson received directly in personal cash settlement was approximately $475,000. For comparison, Princess Diana's settlement from Charles that same year was reported at £17 million. Robert Jobson, author of The Windsor Legacy, summarized the gap plainly. She was desperate for money. She moved fast. Weight Watchers contracted her as spokesperson in 1998. That partnership, the Los Angeles Times later reported, earned her $1.7 million. An Ocean Spray commercial earned approximately half that. She became a spokesperson for Waterford Wedgwood, creating a dinnerware line with the brand. She took corporate speaking engagements and endorsement deals in the United States, pioneering what would later become a standard model for royal-adjacent commercial careers. In the mid-1990s, she had reportedly been carrying a £4.2 million deficit in her bank account, which she addressed through what one source described as a 4-year earnings spree in America. She was operating without institutional credit. Every commercial deal was exposed to full tabloid scrutiny, with no press infrastructure working to manage the fallout. Every endorsement was one headline away from collapse. In 2006, she founded Heartmore LLC in the United States, a lifestyle company intended to support her publishing, media, and public speaking operations. It collapsed in 2009, leaving debts of £630,000. By September 2009, she had been summoned to court in the UK for unpaid bills. By August 2010, Estimates of her total debts ranged between £2 million and £5 million, depending on source. The direction of travel wasn't ambiguous. She was, by the spring of 2010, without institutional protection, without a functioning business, and carrying substantial personal debt. What she had still was a name, the name of a divorced duchess, the mother of two princesses, the ex-wife of a man who was, at that time, the UK Special Representative for International Trade and Investment. In May 2010, Mazhar Mahmood, investigations editor at the News of the World, known in the tabloid industry as the fake sheikh, used that name to run a sting operation. Mahmood spent 20 years at the News of the World and Sunday Times, responsible by the paper's own reckoning for investigations that led to 94 criminal convictions. His methods involved elaborate disguises, concealed cameras, and manufactured encounters. Targets over 2 decades included Sophie, Countess of Wessex in 2001, and Princess Michael of Kent in 2005. In October 2016, Mahmood was jailed for 15 months after being found guilty of conspiracy to pervert the course of justice, for tampering with evidence in the 2014 Tulisa Kontostavlos drugs case, a different sting entirely. News Group newspapers maintained throughout that the Ferguson footage from 2010 was both true and in the public interest. No court ever found otherwise on that specific recording. The story broke in late May 2010. Ferguson had been filmed in a Mayfair apartment offering access to Prince Andrew in exchange for £500,000. The News of the World's headline was direct. Fergie sells Andy for £500,000. What she said, as reported by Time magazine from the taped footage, "That opens up everything you would ever wish for. I can open any door you want and I will for you. Look after me and he'll look after you. You'll get it back tenfold." A further account from France 24, also from the tape. "Andrew said to me, 'Tell him £500,000. He knows that he's had to underwrite me up to now because I've got no money.'" When Mahmood asked, in the Washington Post's account, whether the access would be to Prince Andrew, she said, "Yeah." She left the Mayfair apartment with £27,600 in cash, the sterling figure confirmed in subsequent Telegraph coverage of her £25 million civil claim against News Group. She carried it in a computer bag. Prince Andrew and Buckingham Palace denied any prior knowledge of or involvement in the arrangement. Within days, she appeared on Oprah Winfrey's show. She described herself as in the gutter. She said she had been drinking. She told Oprah she was deeply in debt and desperate to help a friend who needed $38,000. Her public apology called the incident a serious lapse of judgment. Her daughters were 21 and 20. They watched. Jeffrey Epstein had entered Ferguson's orbit through Andrew. The friendship between Andrew and Epstein predated Epstein's 2008 conviction and his 13-month Florida prison sentence. After Epstein's 2009 release, emails that later became part of the public record suggest Ferguson visited him in New York. A September 2009 email, revealed in the 2026 Epstein document releases, noted that Ferguson had traveled to Nepal, paying for the first-class flight with her Roland bank loan, pointing to multiple simultaneous financial entanglements during this period. In 2011, Ferguson gave an interview to the London Evening Standard. She admitted that Epstein had settled £15,000 of her debts. "It was a gigantic error of judgment," she said. "I abhor pedophilia and any sexual abuse of children, and know that this was a gigantic error of judgment on my behalf. I am just so contrite I can't say. Whenever I can, I will repay the money and have nothing ever to do with Jeffrey Epstein ever again." That is her admission. On the record. Evening Standard, 2011. In the same month she gave that interview, she sent Epstein a private email apologizing for having publicly disowned him. The email, as reported by the BBC and confirmed by multiple outlets in September 2025 when British newspapers published it, described him as a steadfast, generous, and supreme friend to me and my family. Ferguson's spokesperson has explained the context. The Guardian, in September 2025, reported that Epstein had threatened to sue her for associating him with sexual abuse in a media interview, what her then spokesperson recalled as a Hannibal Lecter-style phone call after she distanced herself from him publicly. The email was sent, her representative said, on the advice of her lawyers to counter that specific legal threat. That context does not erase the email. It complicates a simple reading of it. She wasn't a voluntary admirer composing unsolicited praise. She was a woman with documented financial desperation, being threatened by the one man in her diminished circle who understood exactly what he held over her, and who had spent his career treating other people's desperation as a resource to be managed. The email exists. The threat that preceded it, per her own spokesperson, also exists. Additional emails surfaced in January 2026, when the U.S. Department of Justice released further Epstein documents. CNN reported correspondence spanning the 2010-2011 period and potentially longer. Ferguson publicly acknowledged one payment, the £15,000. The emails suggest a longer financial relationship, though the full extent hasn't been confirmed. What can be stated is this: a woman who had spent 15 years slowly losing institutional protection found herself seeking informal financial rescue from someone whose entire professional model was built on the leverage that desperation provides. Those emails had stayed private for 14 years. In September 2025, 2 British newspapers published the Supreme Friend correspondence. The institutional consequences arrived within days, in the form the institution has historically preferred, the charities. The Teenage Cancer Trust dropped her as patron. Julia's House, a children's hospice charity, issued a formal statement. Following the information shared this weekend on the Duchess of York's correspondence with Jeffrey Epstein, Julia's House has taken the decision that it would be inappropriate for her to continue as a patron of the charity. We have advised the Duchess of York of this decision and thank her for her past support. The Natasha Allergy Research Foundation, founded by Nadim and Tanya Ednan Laperouse after the death of their daughter Natasha from an undetected sesame allergy, released its own statement. We were disturbed to read of Sarah, Duchess of York's, correspondence with Jeffrey Epstein. In the light of the recent revelations, we have taken the decision that it would be inappropriate for her to continue to be associated with the charity. We would like to thank her for her kindness and support in the past. Prevent Breast Cancer followed. The Children's Literacy Charity followed. The National Foundation for Retired Service Animals followed. The BBC confirmed at least 7 organizations had cut ties within days of the email surfacing. These weren't political bodies. They were charities built around sick children, allergic reactions, palliative care for dying patients, and the welfare of retired working animals. None of them was equipped to absorb association with the Epstein story. Their decisions weren't personal moral judgments about Ferguson's character. They were institutional calculations. After September 2025, her name cost their fundraising operations more than it generated. The arithmetic had shifted. Permanently. This is exactly what proximity pricing looks like in practice. A palace spokesperson does not telephone the Teenage Cancer Trust and issue instructions. The mechanism runs on market logic, not on directive. Once the institution withdraws active cover, which in Ferguson's case it had withdrawn progressively since 1992, every organization adjacent to the palace reads the same price list independently. What is her name worth to your annual gala? What does it cost your donor base if your charity appears in a story about Jeffrey Epstein 2 weeks before your fundraising dinner? The institutional press infrastructure that used to provide informal insurance has been absent for 3 decades. Everyone around her does the same calculation. They come to the same answer. Beatrice and Eugenie have been doing that calculation since they were small enough to be carried out of Balmoral. They continued doing it through every charity that withdrew, every invitation that didn't arrive. Ferguson was excluded from Edward and Sophie's 1999 wedding and from William and Catherine's 2011 wedding, every event where they were present and their mother wasn't. On 30th October 2025, Buckingham Palace formalized what the charities had already begun. The 109-word statement stripped Andrew of his titles, initiated the removal of his honors, and served formal notice on the Royal Lodge lease. It named Ferguson 0 times. Royal Lodge is a Grade II listed property in Windsor Great Park, designated in March 1972. 30 rooms, 7 bedrooms, set within the estate. Andrew had signed the Crown Estate lease in 2003, a 75-year term running to 15 June 2078, paying £1 million up front and committing over £8 million in renovation costs in exchange for effectively no rent for the duration. No other bidders for the lease had been sought. The lease was in Andrew's name alone. Ferguson, who had moved into the house with him around 2008 following a small fire at a nearby rented property in Englefield Green, had no legal standing in the lease. She was a long-term cohabitant. When the king acted, the lease was Andrew's problem to resolve. Her housing situation was entirely hers. Reports from October and November 2025 describe the gap plainly. Journal.ie, citing royal insiders, reported Ferguson would be left to fend for herself, with no offer made to house her. GB News confirmed no alternative residence had been provided. The Telegraph had reported days before the statement that the palace was in talks to find Sarah Ferguson a new home. The palace, tellingly, didn't comment on that report. Andrew left Royal Lodge on 4 February 2026 and subsequently moved to Marsh Farm on the Sandringham estate, a property owned and funded by King Charles. No equivalent provision was extended to Ferguson. By the spring of 2026, Page 6 described Ferguson as effectively homeless, crashing with friends. LBC used the phrase housing crisis. The News of Pakistan reported she was relying on a small group of close friends for short stays, with no permanent home. In 2025, she had sold a townhouse in Belgravia for £3.85 million, having purchased it in 2022 for £4.25 million. A £400,000 loss on a property originally bought as an investment for her daughters. One source noted she would struggle to afford even a terraced house in Windsor at her current net worth, estimated at approximately £745,000. Her daughters' estimated net worth, approximately $5 million each, 5 times their mother's. The question from the comment section deserves a real answer. Princess Beatrice, 36, HRH retained under King George V's 1917 letters patent as the daughter of a sovereign's son, married Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi on 17 July 2020. Edoardo, born 19 November 1983, attended Dragon School, Radley College, and the University of Edinburgh, and founded Banda Property in 2007. The company has developed over 400,000 square feet of London real estate at a total gross development value approaching £700 million, marketing properties through Savills and Knight Frank. A Notting Hill townhouse in their portfolio was listed at $13.4 million. An Australian venture, the Masthead Ocean Club in Gold Coast, a 37-story tower with 28 luxury apartments, represented a £125 million development. Beatrice and Edoardo live between a 6-bedroom Cotswolds farmhouse purchased in 2021, estimated at £3 to £3.5 million, and an apartment at St. James's Palace. They have 2 daughters, Sienna Elizabeth, born September 2021, and Athena Elizabeth Rose, born January 2025. Edoardo has a son, Christopher, from a previous relationship with architect Dara Huang. Reports, citing unnamed sources, so held at that confidence level, indicate that Beatrice has made a converted annex on the Cotswolds property potentially available to her mother. Ferguson has reportedly sought independent housing rather than taking up any such permanent arrangement. Princess Eugenie, 35, HRH on the same legal basis, married Jack Brooksbank on 12 October 2018 at St. George's Chapel, Windsor Castle. Jack, born 3 May 1986, managed Mahiki nightclub in Mayfair before his association with Casamigos began. He was named UK brand ambassador for Casamigos in January 2018, per the drinks business, and promoted subsequently to European commercial manager. From 2022, he has worked in marketing and sales for Mike Meldman's Discoveryland company at Costa Terra Golf and Ocean Club near Comporta, Portugal. The same Mike Meldman who co-founded Casamigos, which means Brooksbank's professional world has remained connected to the same core individuals throughout. Starting prices at Costa Terra run to approximately £3.6 million. Eugenie and Jack live primarily there, with Ivy Cottage at Kensington Palace as their UK base. They have 2 sons, August Philip Hawke Brooksbank, born February 2021, and Ernest George Ronnie Brooksbank, born approximately mid-2023. Reports, again from unnamed sources, indicate Eugenie has offered her Portuguese villa as somewhere her mother could stay for occasional periods. Ferguson hasn't, as of current reporting, taken up any permanent arrangement in Portugal. So, a converted annex in the Cotswolds, reportedly available. A villa in a £3.6 million Portuguese development, reportedly available for stays. A mother who is, by multiple press accounts, not living permanently in either. The question the comment section was asking, why aren't they helping, has a partial factual answer. Temporary options appear to have been offered. But that answer generates a second question, which is the one that matters. Why is this the shape of what is being offered? Why is the arrangement a converted annex and an occasional bolt hole abroad rather than a permanent room, a visible welcome, a public narrative that says, "We will take care of our mother"? That question is answered not by examining what is in the daughters' hearts, but by examining what the institution has been running on its spreadsheets for 33 years. Here is the mechanic stated plainly. March 1992. Formal removal of Ferguson's institutional status and financial cover. August 1992. The informal press protection withdrawn. Every organization adjacent to the palace left to read the market unaided. May 1996. A divorce settlement that delivered approximately 1/46 of Diana's, without an institutional platform to convert her name into sustainable income. 1999, 2011, 2018. Progressively smaller invitations. Ferguson excluded from Edward and Sophie's wedding and from William and Catherine's wedding. She attended Harry and Meghan's 2018 wedding, but not the evening reception at Frogmore House, and was reportedly deeply upset by her exclusion. May 2010. Filmed footage of a divorced duchess negotiating access to the UK's most senior non-working royal for £27,600 in cash, carrying the advance out of a Mayfair apartment in a computer bag. March 2011. A public admission of accepting £15,000 from a convicted sex offender. September 2025. A private email surfacing in which she described that same convicted sex offender as a steadfast, generous, and supreme friend. Each entry in that sequence lowered her institutional value and raised the cost of association. Every organization, every family member, every person with standing to protect calculated the same thing. Proximity to this particular name now carries a measurable liability. The liability compounds. Beatrice and Eugenie watched every step of that sequence, not from the outside. They attended the same events, moved in the same social world, operated within the same implicit understanding that an HRH title is a meaningful designation only for as long as the institution considers it worth maintaining. They have held on to those titles, their charitable patronages, their access to royal spaces, and their standing in a world whose gravitational center is Buckingham Palace. They have held on to these things by doing what everyone who survives inside this institution eventually learns to do. They have demonstrated distance. Demonstrated distance isn't the same as abandonment. It's the institutional calculus applied to every peripheral figure who needs to survive inside the system. You don't attend the damaged person's press conference. You don't stand beside them at the charity gala where cameras will associate your face with their headline. You don't move them into the guest room and brief the morning papers. You make private gestures, an annex, a villa, reported phone calls, and you do nothing publicly that transforms the association into the story. Because if it becomes the story, the proximity pricing mechanism activates. The same mechanism that processed their mother in 1992, and again in 2010, and again in 2025, will process them. It has no particular loyalty. It runs the same arithmetic regardless of generation. Beatrice's husband runs a property business whose brand story is inseparable from the princess connection. And that connection has value precisely as long as it remains at a distance from the Ferguson legal and reputational record. The Epstein correspondence is now permanently in the Department of Justice archive, released in January 2026, and available to any journalist writing about any member of this family. Eugenie's husband markets a £3.6 million lifestyle development in Portugal, where the brand narrative depends on a particular image of aspirational, unencumbered luxury. Moving their mother in publicly would be the dominant story of both brands for as long as any of those emails remain searchable, which is to say, permanently. Their father's situation confirms the arithmetic. Andrew maintained his lodge, his titles, his security budget, and his presence at family events until the institution decided the cost had exceeded the benefit. The decision came via 109 words. King Charles then provided Andrew with accommodation at Sandringham. No equivalent provision for Ferguson, not because the king bears her particular ill will, but because the institution does not maintain a line item for the welfare of a woman who has been off the active roster since 1992. She isn't its responsibility. She never was after March of that year. The daughters know this. They learned it not from a lecture, but from 33 years of observation. From Balmoral in August 1992, through every wedding to which their mother wasn't invited, through every charity that issued its politely worded statement in September 2025, through every press report in early 2026 that described the woman who raised them as crashing on friends' sofas. None of this means they don't love her. The offered annex suggests they do. The offered Portugal visits suggest they do. What it means is that the institution spent 40 years systematically making the public, visible, permanent version of loving their mother the one version they can't perform. Not without activating the same mechanism that has been applied to her since before Eugenie learned to walk. Somewhere tonight, there is a woman who works a double shift and still checks on her mother. She does not have a 30-room house to lose, and that, the comment section is right to say, is exactly why she would never lose her mother. She has no price list for proximity. She has no charitable patronages whose donors are watching who she stands next to at a gala. She has no institutional standing to protect, no title whose value depends on demonstrated distance from a damaged name. She just has a mother, and she checks. Sarah Ferguson raised 2 daughters inside a machine that issues one lesson above all others. Closeness is a liability, and distance is how you survive. The daughters learned it. They learned it by watching what the machine did to their mother, beginning on an August morning at Balmoral in 1992, when a breakfast table went silent, continuing through every invitation that didn't arrive, and every charity that withdrew, and every lease notice that named Andrew and said nothing about anyone else. The tragedy isn't that they won't take her in. It's that the institution spent 40 years making sure that taking her in is the one thing they can't afford. And it made their mother the price of that lesson. If you want to follow stories built from the public record rather than from press releases, subscribe